So, Lydia, what was the craziest thing that happened to you this week?
I still don't know.
You gotta think of something.
I know. I was out of the blue. I thought I didn't have to think of something again. I pushed it from my mind.
Oh well, come up with something. Make something up. You're already into like a little morsel of meat.
Oh, a little treat.
God, I think of the fucking like David Sedaris Me Talk Pretty Someday bit where
Yeah.
like he's in the French class with like all the other foreigners and they're like trying to explain Jesus to this like Muslim woman.
Yeah.
And the one woman is just like, they hung him up on two morsels of wood. And like in my brain, I'm just like, deux morceaux de bois. And like
My
hear
favorite
it.
thing from that short story is how he talks about he's very uncomfortable with like gendered singles.
Yeah.
Like, so he, because of that, like orders multiple hams at the deli. And Hugh was like, why do you have more than one ham? And he's like, because I don't know.
Yeah, there's also, there's also the bit of him where like people would come to his house and he didn't really know French yet and he would try to talk to them, so he would just like point to things and name nouns. He was like, that's a magazine, and they're like, that sure is. Good
My
job.
dad's favorite thing with that is how he becomes like friends with a pedophile while he goes on walks.
I don't remember that. Maybe because like we listened to this in the car growing up, my parents would like skip through that part.
It's like he talks about how he goes like on really long walks and he starts like making friends with this guy who's like estranged from the village.
Yeah.
And like he's estranged too, so like he doesn't, and then he finds out that the guy was like a pedophile.
It's awful.
Or like a convicted sex offender. I don't know if he was a pedophile.
There's also the bit where like the teenagers around there were like so fascinated with the fact that he was from America, and they would be like, "Are you from USA?"
Yeah.
And they would just like lie in his driveway to get his attention. USA.
USA, yeah.
And like everyone's just like, yeah, they'll grow out of it.
Do you think like listening and reading David Sedaris so young is what made us the way we are today?
Probably.
Right.
We just like, we went on like so many road trips when I was a kid because like when we were in the UK, so we would like fly back and forth and like have to drive to the airport all the time.
Yeah.
And like also my grandparents lived on like the other side of the state, and like weren't doing well, so we would drive to visit them. So like half of my childhood is just like David Sedaris.
We would listen to a lot of This American Life.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't only be in the car. We would also just like on Sundays, we would just like put it on and like all sit in the living room together and like listen to it while my mom was at work.
Santaland Diaries.
Yo, like Santaland Diaries is like a very formative part of my childhood.
I feel me too.
And the part where he talks about they give him a piss test before he gets the job and he's like, there was just seeds and stems in my pee. I love that.
Like one more bit before we get started, just so this doesn't become a David Sedaris podcast.
I mean, why not?
Well, there was that short story too where like he like had that thing attached to his leg so he could just like pee throughout the day.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think about that a lot. I don't know why. Just the fact that someone would do that.
Did you read the short story where he had a tumor and he has it removed and then like feeds it to the snapping turtle?
No.
Yeah, that was one in his I think his most recent collection.
Okay.
Pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever his books come out, I like literally read them. Like I'll find it like I find out that he put a book out like on Goodreads or whatever,
Yeah.
and then I read it all night long and I just don't sleep. I just read the whole thing in
I
like
love
one
that.
sitting.
That's
and
so
I'm
cute.
like, now I don't have any David Sedaris for like the next 4 years. Why would I do this? But
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we should introduce ourselves.
all right.
I'm Kaden. I'm a person that exists. You might know me from being insane on Facebook. And this is who you are.
Hey, I'm Lydia. I try not to exist. I'm usually not insane on Facebook. Yeah, I don't know. You might know me, you might not. We'll see where this goes.
You're like a shadow person. You just lurk, and sometimes you can only see you in your peripheral vision. If you look directly at you,
I disappear. I
Yeah.
vanish. Yeah, no, I try to make myself unsearchable so I can one day get a job. But we'll see how that goes.
I've just given up on that.
Well, like before, one of the requirements before I was allowed to apply for site placements for my internship was you have to like make sure that nothing bad comes up when you search yourself.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah, so
Especially if you're going to be like a therapist.
so I made myself unsearchable, but you know how Facebook has those like Facebook URLs for different people?
Yeah.
Like for your profile? So even though I changed my name on Facebook, my URL was still Lydia Schroets. So you can still find me online. And I was like, fuck. And then I spent like 3 hours figuring out how to change my like URL.
Yeah.
Because it's very involved.
I mean,
thanks, Madeline.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if you search my name, like half the stuff that comes up is like my DeviantArt from middle school.
Yeah.
And which is not great, but that's just how I am.
Whatever.
My digital footprint, so to speak.
This kid in my class, he's an addictions counselor, or like he wants to be an addictions counselor, but he works at like a facility right now, and he's been in like rehab and stuff. And so the other day we were sitting in class, and then he all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, when I search my name, my my criminal record doesn't come up anymore."
Oh my god. Okay.
So I searched his name, and the first thing that came up was like an article about him, like an interview with him, and like talking about like addictions. And stuff
I mean,
like that.
That's good.
Yeah, and I was like, "That's awesome, dude."
Yeah,
and
good
he's
for
like,
him.
Yeah, my criminal charge doesn't come up anymore. I was like, you know what? Good for you.
All right. So
All right.
we should probably get started.
Sure.
So what do you know about yaoi? What's your background with that? To what extent were you like subjected to that as like someone in your early teens on the internet?
So there was like one summer where like all I did was like read like yaoi, not only like the extremely like graphic stuff.
Oh my god.
But just regular like gay romance.
I mean, that's like an easy guilty pleasure thing.
Yeah, and I like downloaded like an app on my phone and just,
was it Manga Storm?
Maybe.
I was obsessed with Manga Storm when I was in high school. I would like read it under my desk in class. It was not great. I used up all my phone data on it, and then my mom would get really mad at me.
It might have been. I don't know. It was one that like let you download it, and I had super shitty internet connection, so I like download them overnight and like read them during the day.
I like that.
And yeah, so I just kind of read it all the time, and then it was like I didn't have work or anything because I think I was like 14 or 15, so I just kind of did that, and yeah, and then I was like, all right, enough of this, and I stopped.
So I guess disclaimer is that we recognize that this is extremely problematic genre.
Yep.
Largely pioneered by women fetishizing gay men and using it as a way to project themselves onto it without dealing with their internalized misogyny.
Yeah.
Usually, I mean, for the most part, from what I recognize, BL as a genre was started by shoujo writers. I can't remember her name. It's Michiro or Michio something, but she wrote A Cruel God Watches Over Us, I think. And prior to that, she wrote very like deep emotional shoujo stuff, and this was sort of her way of basically getting into the trauma porn industry.
Yeah.
I read it when I was in high school because the art was pretty and very retro. And it was basically like how many bad things can happen to this one person. There's also another one in sort of the same vein by another shoujo author from the same period. I think they were part of sort of like the same group of authors that really pioneered the shoujo genre and made it serious rather than just like adult men writing cutesy things for little girls.
Yeah.
They sort of turned it into like sort of like women's emotional experiences.
Yeah.
But there was another one by a similar author that was sort of the same vibe. It also took place in Europe. It also took place at points in a boys' boarding school, and it also dealt with a lot of sexual assault and trauma. And had like bad things happening to the same person over and over again, and like you couldn't really see an end in sight.
Yeah.
It's very sad. I'm just like mentally going through this like backlog of things I remember from like rabbit holes.
Yeah.
But I think the most famous one from the period is The Heart of Thomas, which isn't graphic at all. It's actually just very sad. It's about this. It's also a British boarding school, I think, or a German boarding school. So you can sort of see how this trope developed, or like the fascination with boys' boarding schools that Japanese women seem to have in this period. I don't know if that was due to novels or like movies or something.
Yeah.
But it was about this boy who killed himself, I think. And then it was just like his friend like dealing with the fallout of it and like dealing with his romantic attraction to this person who no longer existed. And it was like really interesting. So yeah.
All right.
That's what I remember of that. But yeah, it obviously slowly transformed into what it is today, which is basically straight up porn. Rather than, emotional storylines. You still have some like interesting stuff that deals with interesting issues. You have the shonen ai genre, which doesn't really deal with sex at all. And now you sort of have the rise of sort of like Korean webtoons, which have sort of adapted sort of the Japanese genre and like made it more for the smartphone era.
Yeah.
A lot of the same tropes are still there, but like you'll find that the art style and pacing is a bit different.
Yeah.
So on that note, what do you know about webcomics, specifically Smackjeeves and other things from like the 2000s and 2010s?
I mean, I read like a decent amount of webcomics, not like necessarily yaoi, but like definitely like a lot of gay stuff. Just because like I don't know, it's like an easy way to explore your sexuality without like it's hard when you kind of are like isolated or like don't have like a lot of friends that like you can like talk to about stuff like that.
I agree. I had a really similar experience. I think like it was a way for me to deal with my attraction to men without like having to superimpose myself on like a female character.
Yeah.
Which made me really uncomfortable. And it was a way for me to be like, oh, there's like fulfilling relationships that could and do exist. And like that's a possibility for me.
Yeah.
So
for me it just seemed like a lot more difficult to find like mainstream or at least like relatable content of like female like lesbian relationships, like versus like gay relationships, which are very like common. I guess like there's more content or media that like relates to like long-term like gay male relationships, like if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean GL like Yuri, that's like definitely a genre.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But it definitely seems to be more on the margins.
Yeah.
I see a lot of GL comics. I don't necessarily engage with them that much. I've only read a few, but like I know they exist.
Yeah.
That's about it. Yeah.
Most of like the ones that I have read, like honestly, I stumble upon it. Like I'm reading it because it's just like a comic that I want to read, and then it's like, oh cool, that's cool. There's like a lesbian plotline.
Lesbians.
Lesbians.
Yay. Love that.
Yeah, so I don't know, like that was most of what it was. Like I kind of just like looked for like pretty art and would read stuff just like to see what was interesting. So I guess that's like my biggest thing. Like I did read like a lot of like physical manga that like I would get from like the public library, but like webcomics wise, like I definitely
the neighborhood library was the Henrietta Hankin. It had the Henrietta Hankin Library of Chester County, Pennsylvania. Had a big manga section. I would like take home like 20 at a time.
Yeah.
And just like stay up all night reading them. It's just an experience.
Same. No, I like entirely understand that experience because I kind of did the same thing. And then later on when I worked at the public library, sometimes I would just like when I would be shelving, I would just kind of like sit and like read the manga. Yeah.
So sort of leading into our main topic of the day, I guess, from like 2005-ish, I don't know when it quite started, through I guess 2016 is like when the website started to look more outdated and people started to move off of it. Sort of a big feature of the indie webcomic scene would be Smackjeeves, which was a website that I spent like every day on in middle school and high school. My friend Sophie, at one point, we were hanging out, I think, the summer after 8th or ninth grade. And she was like, hey, there's this website where like you can post your comics and people can read them. And I've been doing that. And I was like, oh, cool. And she gave me some recommendations and I like went home and read them that night. So it was like a very low bar of entry, I think, for like kids that were into drawing and into comics at that period.
Yeah.
Like you had a lot of younger teenagers posting their stuff on there. Lavender Town, I found this out recently, who was like a popular art YouTuber, actually wrote one of the comics I wrote on Smackjeeves as a teenager called Coleslaw, and I found that out from like writing one of her videos, and I'm just like, oh, there's like people who were on like the Smackjeeves scene that are like still big internet art people, and that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll also disclose that I also wrote a Smackjeeves comic. Please don't look it up. I showed Lyd my binder of it recently. The writing's really bad.
I think one of the only times I was on Smackjeeves was when you mentioned your comic, and I Googled it and then read it on there. So
it's like I wrote everything in like Micron and like black and red marker and pencil and like scanned it because I couldn't do digital art.
But you know what? It still looked better than our topic of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think my user picture on there is a troll face because it was like 2010, which is just really really awful.
It's okay.
Yeah, but the thing about Smackjeeves is that because you had a large group of like younger teenagers, largely like younger girls and non-binary people, there was like, and a lot of those people were very into anime, and you sort of had, I don't know how to, I like lost my train of voice here, but what I'm trying to say is that there was a big surge of like BL comics written by high schoolers that got very popular. A lot of them were like fan fiction ones. There were South Park ones, which was really weird.
Yeah.
And that was like a whole thing. I remember reading South Park fan fiction around that period, which is oof. But one of the most prolific and popular ones on the site was this comic called Kaito Shuno. By this author, Angel, who I think is around our age. So while I was reading it, she was also in high school. She would draw everything by hand, post like 3 pages at a time. So I would like come home from school. It would be like 3 p.m. and I would like immediately log on to Smackjeeves and like read whatever she had posted.
Yeah.
And because it was so prolific, you could like actually get caught up in the story. So like me and a few friends would like actually sit in like their parents' like computer chair and like binge read it at night.
Yeah.
Which like not exactly a healthy bonding experience, but that was what we did at the time. And I made Lyd read it. Yep. So give me some first thoughts.
Oh my god. Okay.
Not that you've already talked to me a bit about it off Mike. You like, I'll bring up some texts, but
all right.
Yeah.
So my like first, so this comic is written by a woman. Well, she was like a teenager at the time.
It was 2011, and assuming she's the same age as me, 2011 I would have been 15 or 16.
Yeah.
So in that context, it makes sense because she's sort of like reading all of these tropes and like regurgitating them without really thinking about writing at that time, and like is just very involved with her like original characters and doesn't really want to do a ton of like serious writing around them.
Yeah.
Which is a very teenage thing, but like obviously it does not hold up to scrutiny at all.
Yeah, for sure. But also when you think about the media that like people our age were like taking in 2011, like whether it be like fanfic, like AO3 or like Wattpad or things like that.
Was AO3 a thing at that point?
I'm not sure.
Because I didn't really know about AO3 until I was in college. It felt more like it was still fanfiction.net at that point.
It probably was, yeah. Most of what, like, I didn't really read fanfic simply because, like, there wasn't any media that I was like involved with enough that
That's
I like
fair.
actually like sought out fanfic
Yeah.
for. Except maybe like a couple like TV shows, and I remember using like fanfic.net. And yeah, actually like AO3 I probably started using like in college, like freshman year of college.
I think I'm with you there. Most of my exposure to fan fiction came from a friend I had in high school who would like write Harry Potter and Death Note fan fiction.
Yeah.
And like
wait, like Harry Potter X Death Note? Or
no,
like,
two separate things.
Okay.
She wrote this like very long, actually kind of good Death Note fan fiction.
Sure.
Which made sense because like our friend group was really into Death Note at the time. It was like, I don't know, it was like 2010, so that was still huge. The manga was still coming out, I think. So she wrote that it was like 13 or 15 chapters, and it was good, but she didn't use any paragraph breaks, which I think about a lot. I'm just like, I sat down and read like these walls of text that she had written.
William Faulkner who?
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, back to Kaito Shuno.
So Kaito Shuno has like a lot of the themes that were present and things like that, like forceful sexuality.
Yeah, not great.
Like being gay but not being willing to like address your like homosexuality,
right,
or like sexual preferences or things like that. And also I feel like during that time was like, I don't want to say Omegaverse, but like the alpha omega like dynamic, like the sub-dom dynamic.
Oh yeah, I mean,
beginning to blossom.
That's definitely imported a lot, I think, from like yaoi scanlations that were like being uploaded at that time, like stuff from the 90s and 2010s.
Yeah.
Because I think part of the way it was fetishized was that women would sort of like project themselves onto like this uke character who would be like the bottom and would be like very small and effeminate, and then you had like the top who would be like this tall, lanky, like broad-shouldered, small head, huge hands businessman who would like be very forceful.
Yeah.
And like a lot of rapey tropes in there. It's like not great, but like obviously younger people were consuming this, and it like impacted their view of sexuality, I think, in a very negative way.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it was like present too. Like, even if you look at like Twilight or things like that, like it's the same like trope, it's the same dynamic.
Yeah.
Coming up. So that was definitely something that when I was reading it, I was like, okay, like I absolutely understand like why you were into it in like 2011 before like pretty much everyone in our generation was like, oh, we need to relearn like romantic relationships, I guess. I don't know, like what we think is healthy and like what boundaries are and shit like that.
That was a learning curve for me.
No, for sure. And I feel like a lot of people that I talk to, they feel the same way.
Yeah, like I think because I was closeted at that point, I was like definitely interested in men, and to like a lesser extent some women.
Yeah.
But I like didn't know how to talk about it and deal with it because I couldn't really see myself in like a lot of like main like romance media.
Yeah.
So I would like gravitate to these very unhealthy things where like that were like the only depictions of like queer sexuality I could find that like didn't make me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because a lot of stuff aimed at like older gay men is like very overtly sexual in a way that I wasn't quite ready to handle at that time.
Yeah.
And I feel it just like really impacted the way I viewed relationships in general, I think. And like it wound me up in some like very unhealthy predatory situations because I had like learned to expect those things from the media I was consuming.
No, I agree with that. I feel like the same way, and a lot of my relationships, I suppose, or like like a few relationships that I had when I was younger, before I hit like 20.
Right. I feel like 20 is sort of the cutoff where like your brain starts working. You're like,
oh, okay,
critical thinking.
Yeah, maybe this isn't okay.
Which one is mine?
I don't remember.
Okay. It's like as I'm looking at this coffee in the same mugs.
It's the same mug. Yeah, and I guess like a second thing that really stood out to me is why does she write women like that? Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like,
internalized misogyny,
like
100%.
it really shines through. It shines real bright. Even like the women in the background,
Yeah.
like they'll be at the mall or whatever, and it's just like it'll literally be like blah 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 shit.
I know exactly which panels you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's the like blah 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 panel, like the goth girl panel, and then the fat phobia panel.
Yep, literally. And she's like, "Ooh, ice cream."
Yeah.
And like,
yeah.
But did you reread it?
I sat down, and over the course of 2 days, I binge read the entire thing.
All 97 chapters.
All 97 chapters. So for our audience, since we didn't really give a background as to what the plot, in quotes, of this is, Kaido is a depressed architect.
Maybe.
I think he's an architect.
I think so.
Yeah.
He works in an office.
But he's supposedly 23, but he has his like own apartment.
Yeah.
From like a shitty cubicle office job.
Yeah.
With a balcony.
Yeah.
Which just seems unrealistic to me, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's like when you watch Friends and you're like, how do they afford this in Manhattan?
Yeah. Where is Kaido Shuno supposed to take place?
It's doing that weird thing where it's just like half in Japan, half in America.
Yeah.
Because the person who writes it is a
American.
weeb.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the vibe that I also
Yeah,
got.
because there's like random Japanese words, like they say hi instead of yes, but like half of them have like anglicized names.
There's like one, and he's like, hi. Like, Shuno says hi, and Kaido's like, don't say hi to me.
Oh my god. But yeah, and he attempts suicide.
Yeah.
And like as he's doing this, he's threatened by a strange man who is sulky and has emo hair.
Yep.
And red eyes.
Yep.
And
and the way that they distinguish between the characters, the two main characters, who look almost the same.
Yeah, it's really just hair length.
Yeah, is the like Angel highlights like Kaido's eyes is blue and Shuno's eyes is red.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and that actually comes. Okay, I'll wait on that, but like bookmark there. That actually comes in later in the plot.
Yeah.
As like a dumb theme thing.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, he like attempts suicide. He apparently had a breakdown at work. Is threatened and like invites the man that threatens him into his home after he like also sexually harasses him because he thinks that this guy Shuno might have a cold.
Yeah, and he feels bad for him because he thinks he has a cold. But also Shuno shoves him in the water. So
yeah.
The suicide, like his
It's also like played, it's downplayed a lot.
Yeah.
And like sort of for laughs.
Yeah. All of it is just very bizarre.
It's all very bizarre. It's like into the mind of a 15-year-old, basically.
Yeah, because, well, okay, so yeah, he invites Shuno to live with him, in his apartment, and Shuno continues to sexually harass him.
Oh, absolutely,
like,
yeah.
I mean, that's just kind of like a main theme throughout.
Yeah,
the
it's 100%. I also said Stanford syndrome, the Stanford syndrome experiment. Yeah. It's all very Stockholm syndrome-y, where he's like continuously sexually harassed and at multiple points legitimately assaulted by this person.
Yeah.
And because he feels bad for him, they like wind up in a relationship, and then there's like this whole deep emotional backstory where Shuno is like an assassin. A child assassin, like raised from birth to kill, and then like taught how to speak and have feelings by like a baker,
right?
Yeah, and
who
his
was
daughter,
never named.
Who is never named.
And when he dies, he's like, "Oh no, old man."
Yeah, and like apparently he would like sneak out from the bars of his like child assassin zoo cage.
Yeah.
To like hang out and eat cookies.
Yeah, and when he goes to talk to his boss is how he refers to him, right?
Yeah. I just realized I don't think the boss has a name.
I don't either. And he's just kind of like this like age. Like, he's not really... It doesn't really make sense. He's just kind of like, hey, you owe me. And Shuno's like, you owe me money. And his boss is like, I can give you some, like, time with these sex workers instead. And he's like, I don't want time with these sex workers. I want my money. And then his boss is like, I'll have it for you. And I'm like, is he like having a hard time as a mob boss? Like, why doesn't he have the money now?
The mob boss is portrayed in like this cartoonish, evil, like simplified, like motive way that reminds me of like the boss of Team Rocket in the Pokemon anime.
True.
Yeah, also, like has the same like slicked back hair vibe and like the suit. I'm just like, this is Giovanni from Team Rocket.
Maybe
Giovanni has child
stole.
assassins.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not good. And Kaido also has this friend named Colt at work who has like a Justin Bieber circa like 2008 haircut. Mm-hmm. And is also, like, sexually interested in Kaido.
Yeah, but also, like, openly mocks gay people at different points.
It's a lot.
Yeah, he's just kind of, like, horny.
Yeah, and you find out later he has this tragic backstory where he had an abusive fiancé who killed herself, and she looks like Kaido.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is, like... I don't know. Colt you did not get this far in this comic, but Colt gets this whole expansive backstory later on where he's actually a director at the FBI.
Yeah.
Read that in the wiki.
I read that on the Wikipedia page. And I was like, why would you continue to work at this?
At this architecture firm as like a gopher, basically.
Well, first of all, like, how do you have time for that?
Yeah.
If you're the director of the FBI, like, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the series obviously comes because half of it is just straight up porn drawn on printer paper.
Yeah.
We didn't really mention this yet, but it is drawn in pencil, scanned, stuck into Photoshop. She like takes the grading. I don't know what the word is, but like the focus of it, so like the lines appear blacker, and then she like goes in with what I'm assuming is her mouse and like colors the character's eyes.
Yeah.
And that's it. And every once in a while you'll get like a colored panel that is just so obviously done in Photoshop.
Yeah, and those are always like very disruptive to me because it'll be like the first and the last panel of the chapter.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, why did you choose to do this chapter? And also like, they're always like just like weird like horny panels too.
Oh, like it's all of it is very horny.
Yeah, it's all very like teenage horny girl.
Yeah, another part of it that's interesting to me art-wise is like, well, one I mentioned to you, I think the paneling and the pacing in her panels, not necessarily the pacing of the story, but the way she panels it.
Yeah, it's like excellent.
It's excellent. It's obvious she's read a lot of comics.
Yeah.
She knows how to do that. And to make things make sense, and make speech bubbles make sense, and like she knows like the 180 rule where like how to like do multiple panels of like the same characters talking to each other without making it like repetitive and boring. Mm-hmm. So she's really good at that, and she's also like phenomenal at like character anatomy.
Yeah,
she like has an obvious art style there. She drew boobs better at this time than I am currently able to draw boobs. I still can't draw boobs. She's able to draw like full-bodied characters very well. But the faces are absolutely terrible, which is interesting to me because as someone who like grew up learning how to draw from like how to draw manga books and like reading webcomics and like copying other people's art, is that like the face is like the part that you get really good at first and you like ignore the anatomy.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, I'm just going to draw the heads of these anime boys and that's it. But I'm guessing like I guess she's just so horny that she would just draw like all of these bodies and got like really good at that and just would like ignore the faces.
Yeah.
There's like the whole first half of the comic, they like barely have noses.
Yeah. There's just like these very like indescript faces that makes it kind of hard to like distinguish the characters from each other, which was definitely a challenge for me when I was reading it because like cult especially, I was just like, who is he? Like, he would just pop up, and I'd be like, that's also another thing is the inconsistency of characters.
Yeah.
Like I know that they talk about like the baker or like the boss, like they'll appear entirely different between like different chapters.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and just like the way the story develops over time is it's very tropey, it's very manga-y. It's very like long form anime.
Yeah.
Where Kaido or no, Shuno wants to like break out of this of being like an assassin, and he like makes this enormous plan to like sabotage his boss. There's a lot of like very intense violence that's like sort of downplayed and like not revisited.
Yeah.
He straight up murders a woman that went on a date with Kaido.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that.
Go for it.
So I think that was probably like one of the more like striking misogynistic parts of the like chapters that I've read. I read the first 15 chapters.
Of 97.
Of 97.
Plus the sequel webcomic, which is more recent and the art's better, and it makes sense that Angel is like an adult now, having read that.
Yeah.
Because she like knows how to handle the horniness in a way that isn't like insulting and disgusting.
Yeah. But essentially Kaido has a coworker that he finds attractive.
Yeah, and this is absolutely wild to me. So apparently before his suicide attempt, he had a breakdown at work and like ran out.
Yeah.
And like the next day
he violently ran out and like told people like fuck off, right?
Yeah. Like fuck off, I'm leaving. I'm gonna go jump off a bridge.
Yeah.
And like the next day when he comes in, everyone's just like, "Oh, you're still alive. Haha.
Yep.
Sorry about your breakdown the other day."
Yeah.
The boss takes him into his office, and like the boss's character design is just, the joke is that he's sweaty.
Yeah.
And has like bad nose pores. Which is that's a choice. It's gross to look at. But he's just like, yeah, because of your incident, I have to give you a raise and stocks in the company.
Yeah.
Because of the union. And I'm just like, that can't possibly be a real thing that happens in real life, right?
So I took it more as like them attempting to prevent Kaido from like pursuing any legal action against him.
That would make sense.
Yeah. So he gives him a raise, and while he's giving him a raise, the woman who he maybe finds attractive, but Colt tells him is hot.
Yeah.
And is like, wow, she's so hot, look at her. She overhears that he's getting a raise and then asks him to go to dinner with her. Yeah, so then they go to dinner together at this restaurant, and she like comes dressed in like, I guess like a provocative man, like she's supposed to be like dressed in like a provocative way. And I think before the date, doesn't someone say like, oh, she's just like trying to get your money?
Yeah, she's very much presented as a gold digger.
Yeah. And Shuno gets angry at Kaido when he tells him that like, I'm gonna be home late because I'm going on a date. And Shuno like becomes like visibly angry. He's like, she's only using you for your money, or like she's like a slut or something.
What money though? You're like a 23-year-old architect.
And somehow you have this very nice apartment, and his parents are seemingly middle class.
Yeah, so also like Kaido has this whole background story about like
wanting to be a mechanic,
like growing up with his uncles, his dad being like controlling and abusive in like a very business class white dad way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or it's just like, you must sit up straight at the dinner table.
Yep.
Don't do drugs.
And why aren't you playing sports, etc.
Yeah, and like his mom has enough of it and like runs off and like apparently has some trouble in the law later on, which is like sort of pinned onto the end of the comic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Kaido just has like all of this baggage around like having a respectable career and like not following his dream of just like really liking cars, and he grows out his like long purple hair to look like his uncle.
Yeah.
And it's like this whole thing. But anyway,
Yeah.
back to the date.
So they go on this date and she like orders all this expensive stuff and they really accentuate that. And
I think the menu says like an olive is like $200.
Yeah, something like that. But it's like $200 LOL.
Yeah.
And so basically Kaido's like, I'm leaving. Like, I know you're just doing this for my money. And she's like, yeah, I found out you were getting a raise. That's the only reason I took you on this date. Like, and she gets like angry, and then he leaves. Like, and I guess she pays the bill.
Yeah, but also it's presented that he like later gets drunk by himself.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's like at the restaurant.
Yeah, he comes home drunk.
Yeah.
And at that point, he kind of makes like a sexual advance towards Shuno,
which was interesting.
Which is weird because
he at that point is depicted to like begrudgingly just put up with Shuno, a strange man, by the way, who sexually harasses him
and sleeps in his bed.
And sleeps in his bed and just like has let live with him for like a week at this point.
I think it's like a week or so at this point. Time is kind of unclear. And it
just in general.
Yeah. Although the pacing isn't terrible, the time is very unclear.
Yeah, the thing about Kaito Shuno that I keep saying things that I think are interesting about it. I've been told I use the word interesting too much. But
don't do that.
Guess. Guess a man.
Oh no.
But yeah, it's like it doesn't read as disjointed as a lot of comics that were coming out on Smackjeeves and like even now on Tapas.
I'm gonna go to a small plate tap-ass restaurant.
Small plate tap-ass restaurant. For it's an upgrade from Chili's where I'm taking your mom.
Taking your mom. When your stepdad says you're taking your mom to a tap-ass restaurant.
He's wearing his New Balance shoes.
And his bolo tie.
Oh my god. But yeah, like a lot of those I'll try and reread them or revisit them just for kicks. And they're so disjointed and unreadable, and I don't know how I would like sit down and read all of it.
Yeah.
When there was just like stuff I could read where the pacing was better, the paneling was better, the dialogue made more sense, the story was presented in a better way. Like after Kaito Shuno, I went back and reread this manga called Koisuru Bokun, which I read around the same time as a teenager, which is also intensely problematic. But I ate it up because I thought it was sexy at the time. Yeah. And like I was just like, none of this makes any sense. These people don't have any chemistry, and it just reads as abusive. But Kaito Shuno is the same way, but written in a way where like you keep flipping through the pages because it flows. At least.
Yeah, I like couldn't stop reading it, and so I'd have to like set it down. Last night I was like up, and I was like, it is 1 a.m. to go to bed.
Yeah. And it's like intensely readable for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's very because you're just sitting there and you're like, oh my god. What is going on? Okay, so Kaido returns home, makes like an advance towards Shuno, he comes onto him, and then Shuno's like, no, we can't do this right now. Like you have to be like sober or something. I don't know.
Which doesn't make any sense because he sexually assaults him anyway.
Anyways, later on.
When he's sober.
Yeah, like when he's sober. So, so then Shuno is angry at the woman and goes and just murders her.
Yeah, just straight up murders her. Sticks a knife in her back and like throws her off the same bridge, maybe.
It's a bridge. Yeah, but it seems like a different bridge because like the bridge Kaido jumped off was like a pier.
Yeah.
And also very shallow.
Yeah.
Which I feel like you'd be able to see in the water.
That it was shallow enough.
Yeah, that it was shallow enough.
That you would just like break your
like
legs.
Chest height.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like that deep. Anyways. So then later on there's an investigation at Kaido's work revolving around this woman.
Yeah.
And that is the first time that Kaido's like, I guess I haven't seen her in like a month. As though you wouldn't go to work the next day being like, fuck, like
where the hell is she?
Where is she?
I hope I don't run into her.
Literally, like I hope I don't run into her, or like I hope she doesn't like say something about me at work. But yeah, and then the policeman is like, well, you were the last person with her. How am I to believe that nothing happened, like, with you?
Mm-hmm.
And then Colt is like, well, she was a slut, so it could have been, like, someone else that she was dating at the time. And also, look at Kaido, he's so small and innocent. And the policeman's like, you know what, you're right. He didn't ever kill anybody.
Because he's a twink.
Because he's small. Yeah.
He's like, a twink with a purple man bun.
Exactly. Like, how could he murder someone? So, and that kind of seems to be the end of that plotline. But Shuno just murders that woman and...
In cold blood.
And
just goes about his day afterward.
Yeah, he just continues on with his time, like, with his life, so...
Yeah, there's later in the series, Kaido makes friends with this woman Oasis because they meet at a store, I think, and they both like this character named Ducky.
Yeah.
Which is a rubber duck. And they both like cars, so they start hanging out. And Shuno gets, like, aggressively and violently jealous and, like, basically wants to kill Oasis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this whole thing, and then there's this scene where, like, Oasis's dad basically, like, owns Hilton Hotels or something.
What?
And she has to, like, travels around the country because her dad works in hotels.
Yeah.
So she never makes friends, and, like, Kaido's, like, her first friend.
Sure.
Which, like, whatever, you're an adult woman.
Yeah.
Seems a bit weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this whole thing where, like, Shuno shows up at this, like, hotel reception that Kaido goes to, like, hang out with Oasis. And then they, like, he basically, like, abducts Kaido after, like, Oasis makes a scene to, like, get the two of them together, which doesn't make sense really.
Wait, Oasis and Kaido together? Or
No,
Kaido
Shuno.
And Shuno.
Yeah. And then they, like, bang in a hotel room for 2 hours and, like, come back down, have a conversation with Oasis. And then Oasis, like, has to, like, fly somewhere in the morning, but then decides not to. And it's all very odd.
Yeah.
I remember reading it as a teenager being like, this doesn't make sense.
No. That's another thing about it, is just, like, clearly Angel has never had any sort of sexual experience.
And not at the point that she was writing it, no.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, at that point. Yeah. I'm
like,
not saying, like now.
Seafoam Diary, you read it, and you're just like, okay, she's an adult, she, like, knows what makes, like, relationships compelling.
Yeah.
And, like, sexy to read about, and she's, like, banking on that, and she's, like, using these characters that she's had since she was a teenager and really loves to, like, explore this.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, it's a fun, easy read.
Yeah.
And also the art is, like, it's in color now. The line art makes sense. They have symmetrical faces.
The pages aren't scanned at an angle.
Yeah. God. So what was the last thing you read in your 15 chapters, so I know what else to cover?
So basically in chapter 10 is when Kaido is sexually assaulted by Shuno, who,
I, like, remember it happening much earlier than that. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's chapter 10, and, yeah, basically Shuno, like, has sex with Kaido after, like, jerking him off, which Kaido's like, I don't want this, like, please stop.
Yeah.
And, he does not, and then the next morning he wakes up, Shuno's gone, and he starts freaking out, like, where is he? And Shuno's gone for, like, 3 days. And then he comes back.
Like, where does he go?
I don't know. I think he, like, goes off to do, like, nefarious mob things.
Nefarious mob things
yeah.
with his Pokemon boss.
Like, literally. Like, I don't know where he goes. And it's not really covered in the comics, except Shuno comes back, and Kaido comes home, and Shuno's just, like, in the kitchen. And then there is a, there's the work meeting, like the work get together that they have, and Shuno comes
cross-dressing,
dressed as a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Kaido makes up something about, like, having a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm gonna show up and not having a girlfriend, and all my friends from work are gonna make fun of me.
Yeah, and so he comes, and the other person there who doesn't have a girlfriend, they're like, yeah, it's so sad, he's gay.
Right.
And then his child appears.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
And there's, like, a child running, and they're like, oh, hey, like, little kid. And then, like, the woman is like, oh, he always wants to run to his dad. And then, like, the dad he runs to is the guy who they're like, oh, it's too bad that he's gay. he's so handsome. And then they're like, oh, I guess he isn't gay, LOL.
The other thing about, like, the gay joke character is, like, you go to his desk, like, panels to his desk sometimes.
Yeah.
And he has, like, a Mariah Carey poster and, like, a Bubbles from the Powerpuff Girls, like, pinned up at his desk.
Oh
and he's, like,
God.
sparkling.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
This is too much, actually.
It's a lot, that's for sure. Yeah, and so Shuno comes dressed as a woman, which isn't the first time. I don't think that's the first time.
No, he, like, cross-dresses a lot.
Yeah, he dresses like in one chapter, he, like, provocatively puts on, like, a, like, crop top and short shorts to try to, like, seduce Kaido after he raped Kaido.
Yeah.
Essentially. And yeah, so Shuno kind of, like, cross-dresses a lot, and then they go home, and Kaido's like, why'd you do that? And Shuno's like, you always shit on all your coworkers, but they seem super cool. And it's, like, Kaido's boss is, like, super horny for Shuno.
Which is interesting because Shuno is depicted as, like, being more masculine than Kaido is.
Yeah, like, very, very masculine. And, like,
so, like, the fact that, like, he would cross-dress to this and, like, come off as a cis woman is just, like, nonsensical manga shit.
Well, I mean, I honestly, like, interpreted it as just, like, very homophobic.
It's very homophobic.
Because, like, it's insinuating because Shuno is, like, comfortable in his sexuality and, like, aggressively gay, which alone is, like, very homophobic because, like, he constantly comes on to Kaido, like, constantly is, like, doing, like, just inappropriate things.
Right.
And him being totally comfortable cross-dressing, and also, like, presenting as female, like, passing as female, is just kind of, like, inherently very homophobic.
It's very homophobic.
Yeah.
I think the arc after that, if that's as far as you got, is, like, when they both go to visit Kaido's sister Carol. It's Carol with a K.
Okay, yeah. Carol tried to call Kaido.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want to talk to my sister. And Shuno's like, isn't that just a supportive family member? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the way Carol is portrayed is that she is curvy, and Kaido makes fun of her for being fat because she has boobs.
Yeah.
Which is a whole thing. But she's a real estate agent, I think, and she has a nice house.
Why? What does she think? Like, what are these jobs? Neither of those jobs are very lucrative, like, commonly.
Yeah.
Like, being an architect is, like, architects get laid off a lot.
Right, exactly.
Like, often. And being a realtor, like, is so dependent on the market.
Right, and she's, like, depicted as having this, like, nice big house, like an actual house.
Yeah.
And she's, I think, depicted as being in her, like, late 20s, like 27, 28.
Maybe the reason Kaido has such a sick apartment is because his sister got it for him on the cheap.
That's probably it. I remember when I had a friend who was very briefly working as a real estate agent, and he had, like, this website or software he would go into and, like, show me, like, all of these, like, dinky cheap apartments in, like, Center City that he could just, like, look at, and he was, like, trying to find me an apartment that way. So real estate agents, you know, they have an in with that sort of thing.
I am looking for an apartment.
Yep.
So
I'll put you in contact.
Thanks. I'm looking for an apartment for next August. And yeah, so I have to wait till, like, May to actually find an apartment.
But yeah, the thing with Carol, I think part of it too is that it rains really hard, and the roof to his apartment caves in.
I don't think he's on the top floor.
He's not.
Interesting.
Yeah, and, like, the two like maintenance guys that show up are Mario and Luigi.
Oh no.
Which is, like, a cute visual gag that I appreciated. I thought that was, like, actually funny and wholesome.
Yeah. I thought it was just another one of those things where she just blatantly steals it.
No, it was cute.
Else.
They're like chibi, and, like, one of them, like, pulls up a coin and they're like, oh, look, a coin, and it's, like, one of the Mario coins. And I thought that was really cute. But cute. Yeah, because of that, they have to like go live with Carol for a few days. And Shuno is like, wow, your sister's hot. And Kaido was just like, please stop.
Yeah.
And like, Carol wants to sleep with Shuno.
Okay.
Which is a thing. But like, she goes upstairs and they're fucking, and she catches them fucking, and she's like, oh god, you're gay, okay.
At that point, is it consensual?
Yeah, I think it's consensual at that point. It might not. Actually kind of reads as like dubcon.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Yeah, because there is another, I think, like chapter 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Like, Kaido finally caves, because Shuno keeps being like, can we take a bath together? Like, all the time.
God, why is that, like,
And then there's, like, this weird thing where, like, Shuno's, like, rubbing Kaido's back, and he's making, like, horny noises. And then Shuno's like, well, I guess I'm gonna have sex with you now. And Kaido doesn't really seem, like, happy about it.
Yeah.
Or upset about it.
No,
he doesn't, like, adamantly say no, like he does the first time that they have sex.
But it's still, like, not
It's
great.
not, yeah. That's another thing. So, like, the comments on the chapters
I was about to bring this
are
up.
amazing.
Yeah. Like, half of them are just like, I see you're romanticizing sexual assault again.
Yeah! And literally, like, so when it first begins and Shuno starts, like, being, like, pushy.
Yeah.
People are like, this isn't really consensual. He said no. And then, as it progresses, people are like, wow, that's rape. But also, other people are like, that wasn't consensual, but I still thought it was hot. And I'm like,
people
literally
showing your
girl,
true colors.
Like this, I don't know if she like her ABI was a girl.
Yeah.
But this person whose name was like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Was just like, this was super hot, even though it wasn't okay. And I was just like, well then, like, why are you commenting?
Yeah, I don't show your ass like that.
I guess if you're on tap ass, you're good.
Tap ass. Oh my god. Yeah.
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 The comments are just like, honestly, they drove me like through, because I just had them up like next to like reading the comic.
Mm-hmm. Were you reading it on your phone or on a computer?
On my laptop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know tap ass. I'm just gonna keep saying it that way. Is like kind of meant as a phone app, but I've never used it on my phone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It works well as a computer.
Yeah.
Website.
The other thing with it being uploaded, I think I'm just gonna like cover the rest of it here before like jumping into talking about Angel Yeah's later career, basically. Is that I guess near 2015, 2016, she was starting to like lose steam and like was starting to get like really unhappy with like the way she had written the story early on.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because she would have been like 21 at that point.
Yeah.
So what happened was it starts slowing down after like the part where like Shuno basically abducts Kaido because he's overworked and makes him go on a vacation to Hawaii.
Okay.
Which is a choice.
Yeah.
And that's like when things are like actually consensual and they're like having a good time together.
Mm-hmm.
So like the relationship has like actually developed into a relationship at that point. And then there's the thing where like Shuno has like this big violent mob thing he has to do on some island. And at that point she stops drawing it on paper and like starts drawing it on a computer. So like the lines are a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
But like you can tell that there's like less and less pages being uploaded. So at a certain point, she starts doing this thing where she'll like half draw it, like half write it out, but she's like not good at writing novel style, so it's like kind of hard to read.
Yeah.
So like the big emotional climax there is that Carol, Kaido's sister, is getting married to like her high school boyfriend who was like this like edgy punk kid that she started seeing again.
Yeah.
After her dad had like forbade her to ever talk to him again.
Of course.
So she gets pregnant and like has to get married.
Okay.
And Shuno comes with Kaido to the wedding and they see Kaido's dad and like Kaido has like a breakdown where he's like, I'm gay, this is my boyfriend. Mm-hmm. And then his dad like freaks out and then they like yell at him and it's like this like emotional resolution to his dad sucking,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Which was actually like well done, I think. And then they meet fucking Kaido's uncles again.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, how the internet exists, how did you have like no contact with your nephew who you loved so much?
Like love so much, and as a 6-year-old,
yeah,
allowed to like dink around in your mechanic shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's like obviously a talented kid.
Yeah.
And like you like yell at his dad as his dad is like dragging him off and being like, you can't interact with my son anymore. So you'd think that like through Facebook or something, they would have like reached out and been like, hey kid, how are you doing? We're just checking in, making sure everything's okay.
Yeah.
Because they frame it as just like you are going to raise your son to be a suicidal mess, which of course he does.
Mm-hmm. So when does Kaido's mom leave? Like when he's a kid?
Yeah, when he's a kid.
Because I know that they kind of like sow the seeds for that early on. Because Kaido talks about, there's like a chapter that's like a flashback.
Yeah.
Where Kaido like he's 6 and at the mechanic shop, and his uncle's like, he works better than a 20-year-old, and I was like, what? Because he also was at the mechanic shop by himself, gets himself home.
Yeah.
And then his dad is like, why don't you play sports with the other kids? And he's like, I don't like the other kids. And I'm like, he's 6. Like, he doesn't have these like formed concepts yet.
Right.
But
yeah, it's just like he gets home at one point after playing outside. His mom is like on a motorcycle and she's just like, I got sick of daddy's rules.
Oh my god. Yeah, because like his dad will leave for work and then she like takes her hair down and like wears like rocker clothes.
Yeah.
And then just drops Kaido off at the mechanic and clearly like goes to do other shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that she's like not allowed to do when the dad is there.
Smoking weed with her friends.
Yeah, so it makes sense that she leaves, but
yeah.
It's kind of shitty that she would leave them.
Yeah. And then there's so like the next two things that happen that are like written in novel format and then it like I guess less and less novelly and just becomes like chapter summaries basically.
Yeah.
So she can like write it as like having a conclusion at least. Mm-hmm. Is that like Shuno quits his architect or Kaido quits his architect's job finally because he's like, this makes me miserable, I hate it, I want to work as a mechanic. But like he doesn't have like any sort of certification or degrees. So he like here's a radio ad that's like we're looking for like people to compete in this like mechanic contest, which is a thing that exists in this world apparently.
Yeah.
So he answers in and he like apparently does a really good job and he like gets a job as a mechanic. And it's like all very nice and you feel good for him and you're like, oh, it's nice that he's like finally loving himself and like doing what he likes to do.
That's good.
So like there is a like an emotional heart, an arc to the story. Despite like how fucking awful it is to all of its characters.
Yeah.
And then he gets like embroiled in like this like mob thing because Shuno is like trying to leave the mob because he loves Kaido. Mm-hmm. And like they abduct Shuno or abduct. I keep mixing them up because they're the same person. They abduct Kaido and like Colt, who is now revealed to be like an FBI director. And his, like, kind of boyfriend, Jude, who is, like, this tiny man with, like, one eye who wears pink sunglasses, get involved. And then, like, they rescue him and everything's fine. And, like, at the end, Shuno ends up working for the fucking FBI.
Yeah.
As, like, a deal so he doesn't have to be tried or something.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. And the thing about the story is, like, we talked about, like, how their eyes are different. Right, colored in when like nothing else is.
Yeah.
Throughout the story, like when they get closer and closer together, like when they're having sex, their eyes are like purple.
Okay.
So it's like they're joined together. They're one person. It's like very nice work with themes there.
Yeah,
good job.
We love that.
Yeah,
we love to see that.
And like hints are dropped that they actually knew each other when they were children.
Oh no.
Yeah.
When Shuno was assumably a mute child assassin?
Apparently.
Yeah.
But, like, and that's, like, why Shuno loves Kaido, despite not really knowing him.
Yeah.
Which is very manga.
I really hate when that trope is used.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like that trope.
It's a bad trope.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, it'll be in, like, mainstream stuff.
it's also just like you're not the same person you are when
As
you're
a
a child as when you're an
At
adult.
all. Yeah, like I don't know.
It's like it's bad.
Yeah.
But like hints are dropped. Like Shuno mentions it to Kaido at one point, and Kaido's like, haha, you're falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
That's not real. He like yeah, and then he like mentions that he remembers knowing some like weird cat-like kid as a child.
Yeah.
But like it's never really resolved until like the very last scene is like a fucking flashback. It's just all very weird.
Mm-hmm.
Of them being children together. So they like never discuss it together. Even though apparently that's like the origin story.
Mm-hmm.
So she's just like dropping all of these tropes together in like a cauldron and like stirring and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the plot of Kaito Shuno.
Damn. Wow. I have so many chapters to catch up on.
You don't do it unless you want to.
I don't know if I do.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I found myself invested in the characters by the end.
Yeah.
Which is more than I can say with like a lot of similar stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just like so emotionally taxing to read stuff that's just like so actively harmful
Mm-hmm.
that it like messes with your brain and then you feel guilty about it.
Does Kaido ever like stop being so like openly homophobic? Like using like homophobic slurs and such?
He comes to term with the fact that like I don't know, they're obviously in a relationship by the end, but
yeah.
Kaido, like even in the sequel comic, which I'm about to talk about, will still like freak out when like Shuno shows him affection or like sexual interest.
Yeah.
So that's like never really resolved.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, especially since she like develops her style and kind of becomes more mature with her writing.
Yeah. And I just realized I never talked about Shuno's parents.
No. How? Okay.
So this is portrayed as a flashback that obviously happens when he's a very young child, because when he's like taken in by the mob, essentially, he like can't speak.
Yeah.
So obviously he's remembering all of this as like a 3-year-old who can't talk yet with like crystal clear memory of his parents' dialogue.
Sure.
Which, yeah. So apparently his dad is a stoner who like borrows money from the mob for weed. And they show, and like his mom is like pregnant with his brother. And then like the mob shows up at their house, kills his parents, and takes like Shuno as like loan collateral or something. Sure.
For my weed addiction.
Yeah, for his dad's weed addiction. Again, very obviously written by someone in their like early to mid-teens. And so the thing with the mom being pregnant when she's killed is that like at the very end of the comic, it's revealed that like his little brother was a miracle baby and like survived his mom being killed.
Yeah.
So he just like randomly has this brother now.
Oh.
That is like mentioned and then shown once in Seafoam Diary.
Okay.
As like being blonde with red eyes.
Yeah.
And playing video games and having like a hentai poster in the background. So he's a scumbag.
He's a scumbag, just like Shuno.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. So getting into Seafoam Diary. This is written, I think, she started writing Seafoam Diary for fun, I think, before she had like officially finished Kaito Shuno.
Yeah.
So it would have been like 2016, 2017. It's all in color. It's just like basically situational comedy for the most part of like Kaito and Shuno living together in a nice house. Shuno works for the FBI now. Kaito, I'm assuming, is a mechanic at this point for like that being his passion. But like also if your boyfriend / partner is like a head honcho at the FBI who like trains people in combat, maybe you don't have to have your own job.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. Yeah, it's like sexy sitcom.
Okay.
They end up banging. It like shows them like hanging out at the mall, stuff like that. And then after a while, it just turns into her like exploring their relationship between Colt, like Kaido's friend from the architecture firm, who is the FBI director,
Yeah.
and Jude, who is his friend from high school.
Okay.
Question mark.
Yeah.
Who also works at the FBI with him and is his partner somehow.
Sure.
At the FBI.
Yeah.
Because that's how lives work.
Yep.
And having friends works. And like Colt is like obviously like sexually interested in Jude, but like they don't get together because they have like so much emotional baggage until like the end.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
How long is Seafoam Diaries?
I read it in less than a day.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not long at all. I think she finished writing it in like 2019.
Okay.
So it's like 3 years of content where she's like only posting sporadically. Yeah, and it's like it gets into the backstory of like Colt's girlfriend Amelia, who like he also met when he was in school.
Yeah.
And she was obviously very mentally ill and like somewhat emotionally abusive and like closed off. And he's just like, I guess this is what being in a relationship is like her treating me like shit. And then she kills herself.
Yeah.
And so that's a thing that happens, and that fucks him up really badly.
But Colt is still so dismissive of Kaido's suicide attempt.
Exactly, which is like what makes it confusing and interesting.
Yeah.
But also she wrote this obviously and like scripted this when she was a bit older. So I think she has like a better grasp of how mental health works at this point.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that after that happening, he would have a hard time getting into like a serious relationship with his best friend from high school.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. The other thing that's interesting about Jude is that like he's depicted as being slightly chubbier, which I think is a massive improvement on her fat phobia.
Yeah, I would say.
Is like having sex scenes with someone who's a bit like depicted being chubbier and like short.
Yeah.
Versus like what she treated fat people like in her comic as a teenager.
Yeah.
So. And the last thing that happens in Seafoam Diary that is the conclusion, and this is so funny to me, is literally just Kaito giving Shuno a blowjob for the first time.
For the first time?
That was like the last internalized homophobia he had to work through, I guess.
That's it, and then he's good to go.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So what are your closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts?
On knowing the arc of this entire story now.
I don't know. I guess, like, I appreciate that, like, you can see through the story, like, the writer's, like, growth and development as both, like, an artist and a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that she just puts up, like storyboard outlines, basically.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, here you go.
Which, like, honestly, that's a mood.
Yeah.
Like, if I had, like, the entire arc of a story in my head since I was, like, 14 years old and had, like, lost steam, I would have at least wanted to, like, you know, have, like, the conclusion there.
Yeah.
So I felt like I would have finished the project at least.
Yeah, and she did.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Especially for something written when you're very, very young.
Yeah, because you see that a lot in, like, stuff like that. Like, where they just drop it. And
yeah,
like, okay.
They just, like, never finish it.
Yeah, but she did. And
like,
she said, I'm gonna do this.
One of the most infamous things about webcomic is the artist saying, I'm going on hiatus and never coming back to it.
Never coming back, ever.
I recently checked on a webcomic I read when I was younger, also on Smackjeeves, called Jenny Hanover, which started in 2007 and went for years and years and years. Also started when I think the author was a teenager. And you could, like, see her emotional growth and, like, her growth as an artist and a writer and, like, also as a comedian, like, grow over time.
Yeah.
Because, like, the core of the comic was just, like, these kids in, like, community college start a prog band.
Okay.
And it's all about, like, their lives and, like, the lives of their friends and, like all of the queer people in, like, this town in New Mexico. And it's, like, all very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, she would have this, like, this massive list of characters because, like, each one of them had a name and a story and, like, likes and interests.
Yeah.
And, like, a compelling character design. And, like, you could click on it hyperlinked and it would take you to a character sheet.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
she also had like that for like every band that showed up in the series.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so awesome. But I checked on her Tumblr literally in the driveway of my orthodontist last week, and I realized she had stopped writing it in around the time Donald Trump got elected because it like understandably took an emotional toll on her.
Yeah.
And she like never came back to it because she was embarrassed about like stopping doing something she had like done for 10 years.
Yeah.
So the fact that Kaito's Shuno like ended is interesting and like shows that the Angel has a work ethic.
Yeah. She wanted it to be done and she did that.
Yeah.
Which is honestly like that's great. Like I mean it's super problematic.
Yeah. But I would like write comics in my sketchbook of like emotional scenes in my story, of which you read the first chapter.
Yeah.
And like I will like go back to my parents' house and look through those sketchbooks, and like that's also really problematic stuff. I kind of wrote never having been in a serious relationship before.
Yeah.
Like never really been in a sexual relationship before, and it's like all lifted from stuff I had read, and it was like very problematic. So I can be, well, I think that Kaito Shin was actively harmful. I can be sympathetic
absolutely.
to the fact that it was written by someone that young.
No, for sure. I feel the same way, like looking back on like what I've written.
Yeah.
And just like the relational interactions between people.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of it is just like I pulled a lot of like YA tropes from like the YA books that like I just like
consumed.
devoured.
Yeah. I also like when I was that age, I would just like get home from school at like 3 p.m. and if like sometimes I would just like read a manga from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. and be like, oh shit, A pushes tomorrow, and then like do homework until 2 a.m.
Yeah.
So I would just sit down and like devour everything on Manga Fox under like the BL tag or like the gender bender tag.
Yeah.
Because gender bender was like another manga genre, I think, not really having language to put words to like my gender experience and like not feeling at home in my body.
Yeah.
Was like another escape for me. And like that's another genre that's discussed as being very problematic. Because like half the time it's depicted as a girl disguising herself as a boy, essentially, and like going to a boys' school.
Yeah.
And then there's like some romantic tension where like one of her friends has a crush on her, and he's like, "Oh my god, am I gay?" At the end, she's a girl, and he's like, "Okay, I'm straight."
Yeah.
So like, it's all resolved, and he never has to deal with anything. So yeah, but yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. So Angel, I checked on her Twitter and I checked on her Smackjeeves account. Not Smackjeeves, Tapas account.
Yeah.
She's still sort of active. She has a Patreon for this comic, Kale and Bailey, she writes.
Okay.
Which is like a horny yaoi comic that's like written a bit more mature. There's like some off-color jokes in there, but I think the core of it is like that she's actually a funny person and knows how to write like one-liners.
Yeah.
The thing about it is that they're furries.
Okay.
Which I guess is like a turn I did not see coming in her career.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
Yeah, but that's the thing that existed. She had another comic on Tapas that she wrote and then stopped in like 2017. That was also, it took place in France and it was about kids at like an art school.
Yeah.
But it never really went anywhere. And checking on her Twitter has like 1,000 followers, so obviously she still has some fans.
Mm-hmm.
That's more followers than like the author of Fritz Fargo, which is another very good webcomic I read about like gay kids in the 90s who are like actively dealing with trauma and addiction.
Yeah.
And I recommend it. The art's good. So yeah, she's she has a following, and she still draws Kaido and Shuno. So there's still that's the emotional core here. That's the note I feel like we're semi-ending on, is that she still has like an emotional connection to these characters.
Yeah.
Which I can relate to because I too have an emotional connection to like OCs I've had since I was very young.
Yeah.
They're like friends that like you write stories about, and
exactly.
they're like there for you in a way.
I entirely understand that because I feel the same way with like characters that I've written.
Right.
So like I understand, like even though they like obviously they shift and they change, but like at the same time, it's like someone who's like comfortable.
What are you trying to say right now? You're just staring at me.
I don't know what I guess like it's comforting, you know.
Yeah.
Like it's familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
I'm trying not to. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
You're doing whatever you're doing. You're doing a good job.
Okay, I appreciate.
So on that note, what do you think we should cover next?
Oh God, I have
for digital subjectivities. The podcast about growing up on the internet.
So I get to subject you to something.
You get to subject me to something now. You have any bright ideas?
I don't know. Honestly, I was just thinking about making you read like a really terrible romance novel that I recently read.
So the thing with that is that because my mom, when I was growing up, like considered herself a romance author, I refused to read romance.
Fine.
I still refuse to read romance. But so this will be like my first time doing it.
Oh God. I'm definitely gonna make you read like a Janine Frost vampire romance novel.
What about Nora Roberts?
Nora Roberts? I'm not super familiar with her work.
I just know that she's like the only one that's actually good.
Yo, I think she just like wrote a new series.
Really?
Yeah, because so I refuse to pay to get the ads taken off my Kindle.
Mm-hmm.
So
so you find out who's writing what.
So I keep getting like these weird targeted ads that really don't have anything to do with what I read.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them that keeps popping up is a Nora Roberts ad.
Oh my God.
Series she has, yeah.
My God, I was so scared we had been talking for like 3 hours, but okay, we're good.
No, we're chill.
We're chill. We're not one of those podcasts that's like 4 hours long of us ranting.
Are you talking about the Joe Rogan Experience?
We are the Joe Rogan Experience 2.
2.0.
2.0.
It's gay now.
We're gay now. I had an intrusive thought the other day that was like, I'm the trans Joe Rogan.
Oh no.
And that was like the worst thing I've ever thought.
So if you had the option,
yeah,
would you move from Los Angeles to Texas so you can own more guns and also not have to deal with quarantine restrictions?
No, because I'm scared of Texas.
Also, like, it shows his white privilege.
Yeah.
That he's going to go to Texas and still do as many drugs as he did in LA, where drugs were, like, more...
I'm scared of Texas. The only person I know from Texas is my friend's fiance.
Yeah.
Who is, like, he's a good guy. We, like, have interesting conversations about, like, social justice issues. He was in the Marines for a long time. He started at St. John's when I think he was like 28 or 29. Mm-hmm. They own a house together. I recently found out he has like an enormous pickup truck.
Oh. Good for him.
Good for him. So good job, guys.
Good job. Texas made one.
Texas.
Nah. Two good things.
Two good things.
Hank Hill.
I love when people argue about whether or not Hank Hill would have voted for Trump on Twitter.
He wouldn't have.
He's like too like blue-collar union guy-ish for that.
Yeah. Hank Hill is a strong centrist.
The only one we like.
Well, okay, because... So in the show, there are different times where, like, his friends... Not Boomhauer. His Boomhauer's just, like, chaotic.
I love that
Boomhauer's a Texas Ranger.
Yeah.
And no one addresses that.
So the thing about Boomhauer is that King of the Hill has a Japanese dub.
Okay.
It's famous for like Japanese fans of the show arguing about whether the English dub or the Japanese dub is better, which I think is really funny.
What, specifically Boomhauer's or anything?
No, but like I saw a clip of like Boomhauer in the Japanese dub because I guess accents in Japan are considered more dialects. It's what words you use rather than like how you pronounce things.
That makes sense.
And in English, our accents are more based on like how you use your vowels and like how much you mumble, basically.
Yeah.
Boomhauer, like you can just hear him talk, and I guess they gave him like a regional dialect of some sort, but like it's not mumbling at all. You can read exactly what he says in the subtitles.
I love that.
So that's my King of the Hill trivia for today.
No, but there's different times where like Bill or Dale will talk about like shit, and Hank is like, you're being brainwashed. Like, you're not being reasonable with this. Like, you need to use critical thinking. And they're like, no, like, it's blah, blah, blah. And, like, saying that, I'm like, he absolutely would not have voted for Trump. Like, he would have used critical thinking. Yeah. Would he have voted for Hillary Clinton? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't...
But I don't think he would have voted for Donald Trump.
I have I have like one friend who I would consider right of center.
Yeah.
And like most people would consider that a personal embarrassment, but like he's been my friend for a very long time, and I think he's a genuinely good person with some bad ideas about economics.
As long as they're not like a shitty person. Like,
yeah. But like, yeah, they also wrote in like a joke candidate in 2016 because they could not bring themselves to do either one.
Yeah.
Which like knowing like their moral stance makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And like I don't think that was the right thing to do, but it makes sense.
No, I know a few people like that too.
Yeah.
So I understand. Like one guy I knew like wrote in his cat. And I was like, dude, are you serious? Like what the fuck?
Like what's the point of like doing a joke write-in candidate if you're gonna go through the trouble of voting, I guess?
He was a Marco Rubio stan. And like you may be like, how can one stand Marco Rubio? But like this kid like stands Marco Rubio.
I was still in college in 2016, and I had an 8 a.m. Latin class. It was Latin 1, so you had an interesting group of people.
Of course.
And there was a girl there who was just like, yeah, I'm voting for Marco Rubio because I think he's handsome.
That's like so many people.
Yeah. And so do you remember Nick Amaro on Law and Order, right?
Yeah.
Handsome guy. When I lived with my two old roommates, I would call him handsome Marco Rubio, and they would think I was being offensive, and I'm just like, no, he looks like a handsome version of Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio isn't not handsome.
Yeah.
But like
he's handsome in a way where he's just like more handsome than anyone else on a debate stage.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, Beto O'Rourke, I think people would talk about him being handsome. I think he just looks like someone's, like, ugly college boyfriend.
I think Beto O'Rourke looks like... You know how, like, golden retrievers are, like, the stock image of dogs?
Yeah.
Beto O'Rourke is, like...
the stock image of dogs!
Beto O'Rourke is, like, the stock image of politicians.
Remember when Andrew Yang, like... I may be misremembering this, but he, like, challenged Beto O'Rourke to, like, a skating contest?
No.
Like a skateboard contest?
No, you might be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all these people were like, Beto's a faker. He used to skate, but he doesn't anymore.
Oh, my God.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so... On that note, we are nearing an hour and 30 minutes, and I have anxiety. So... Next week, or like next several weeks, because we have work schedules probably, Lydia will be subjecting me to a romance novel of some sort.
Maybe a romance novel.
Maybe a romance novel.
We might go fanfic.
Oh my god, so if you subject me to like...
How familiar are you with the Storm Pilot fanfic?
I've never heard of this before.
Alright, here we go.
Is this another thing that you grew up with and was like integral to you in a very problematic way?
So like, when the film
Yeah.
The Last Jedi came out.
This is a Star Wars thing?
When the film The Last Jedi came out, I was like, Oscar Isaac? Gay? And that's where it began.
That's where it began?
That's where it began.
Okay.
So, yeah, I now know what we're gonna do.
Okay.
It's gonna be a Storm Pilot AU where they work in a coffee shop.
Why is it always fucking coffee shops?
Right? Like, why are there... I was trying to explain that to Connor the other day, about how there's so many AU tropes about coffee shops, and he was like, why? And I was like, that's just how it is. That's just how it be.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I will be looking forward next time to being subjected to fanfiction, something I have not read since I was 19 and I got really into, like, gay Evangelion fanfiction.
Wow, way to flex.
Way to flex.
Way to flex.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.